one of the things I like to say is that in most of the communities I hang out in, which are a lot of activist communities and with a lot of economists, speaking about capitalism as a problem is like, and using the word capitalism is in so many contexts like a third rail, you know?
Yeah.
If you use that word to describe what the problem is, everyone freaks out. And actually, that's what got me to write this book, The Capitalism Papers. The subtitle is The Fatal Flaws of an Obsolete System. It was a conference that we held in 2008 among about 35. I am actually by training an economist and been working in the anti-globalization movement for quite a while. But we brought together 35 well-known economists, well-known in activist circles, mostly on the left, a few mainstream economists, and a few Marxist economists. And we talked for 3 days over in Fort Mason. And on about the morning of the third day, we decided, okay, let's write a joint statement saying how we see the problem and naming capitalism as the root cause of all this and defining the ingredients of capitalism that lead to this disastrous situation that we're in now. And then 3 of the economists, and these are, let me say, these are left-wing economists. I'm not going to name them. You've heard of probably a couple of them. They write very, very good books criticizing the system, but they only call it the system. They don't call it capitalism. And they stood up at that point and said, if we're going to make a statement that names capitalism as the problem, then we have to leave the room and we can't use our names. We have to leave the meeting.
Did you name the economists?
I don't think I can. David Korten is one of them. He's one that I'm looking at. But their critiques are always perfect. You know what I mean? They have it all figured out, but they won't name the system. And then about 2 weeks later, I heard on NPR Bill Moyers talking, and he was quoting Socrates, and he was saying Socrates said that if you're going to fight something, you have to name it really clearly, so you can rally around it and organize against it. And I thought, well, that's good. He's saying just what I've been thinking since this conference. And then he named it. He called it plutonomy. And I thought, well, that's the wrong name. Plutonomy is a subset of capitalism. It's not. Plutonomy is what comes from capitalism's opportunities and frustrations for the very real. And they work it around so that there's no resistance to what they're doing. So that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to write this book and make it into a kind of primer. The primer being what are the ingredients that we're talking about? What is capitalism actually? You know, does it have characteristics that we could name, and so we know it when we see it? And so the book is sort of broken into 7 major parts. I almost called it, like I did the TV book, was called 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. I almost called this 7 Arguments for the Elimination of Capitalism. But the publisher said, no, that's no good. I said, yeah, it is good. He said, no, they all think it's the same as the TV book. So anyway, we didn't do that. But I did break it into 7 ingredients of capitalism, and I'll tell you what those are, and then maybe expand on 1 or 2 of them. I don't have that much time. The 7 major, characteristics that drive capitalism right now. There may be others at other periods, but these are the things that make capitalism obsolete. That is to say, even if capitalism had a function 200 years ago or 150 years ago, when the world was undeveloped, there was a lot of resources around, and there was a lot of cheap labor and slave labor that could develop all this very, very quickly. even then it wasn't a good idea, but now it's an absurdity. So the 7 parts that the arguments are broken into is the idea of endless growth. I mean, capitalism is built on endless growth. The idea is that if you have wealth, your job is to have more wealth, and to use that wealth to have more wealth, and to use that wealth to have more wealth, and to use that wealth to have more wealth. That's do many of you know Wallerstein, the great economist from the University of Connecticut, I guess, Emmanuel Wallerstein. Anyway, that's his definition of capitalism. It's a little different from the Marxist definition or the standard definition. It's all about wealth requiring more wealth. That if you have a certain amount of wealth, you are obliged to seek more wealth in the system of capitalism. Now that's running into problems right now because we're running out of resources very, very rapidly, and the planet is going belly up very fast. So they've got a problem. So now they're investing their money in other money, and it's all internal. It's like a giant Ponzi scheme. So that's going to collapse for sure. The second ingredient is amorality. That is to say, there's nothing in the capitalist system that requires that you do anything because it's the right thing, or because it has a moral element to it, or a spiritual element to it, any estimate, any kind of controls involved in it. I'll come back to that in a second. The third is that it's inherently hierarchical. Capitalism is nothing but hierarchical. You have investor classes buying the stock, then you have boards of directors, then you have employees. Employees are the most vulnerable of the group. All the benefits flow up. To the degree that the employees get benefits, the top level doesn't. In other words, when the employees get a raise, the investors don't. They get less. In other words, the money that would otherwise go to the top goes to the employees. So that's basically against the system. So the system is devoted to not sharing its wealth and to not becoming equal. The fourth ingredient, and I don't want to have time to explain all these, but it's all in the book. The fourth is the privatization of government. That is to say, the government can't be left to function on its own in a democratic manner. You've got to control it because the way the government behaves affects what your opportunities are. So we all see that now. We see in this last election, the Koch brothers and a few others basically determined that whole election. And by the way, the Koch brothers are going to be 140 million very soon. As soon as the Keystone Pipeline, 140 billion. As soon as the Keystone Pipeline is approved, because unbeknownst to a lot of people in our organization that's worked on this, they own a lot of that land in Alberta, and they've kept it quiet. But we found the documents. They own a lot of land in Alberta that will immediately increase their wealth by 30 or 40%. The fifth element is the privatization of consciousness. That's to say, the control of how we think, what we know, how we view things, and that's done largely through control of the media. What people don't know is, generally speaking, is that only 7 corporations, I write books about the media, so I really know this. 7 corporations control 70% of global media. 7 corporations control 70% of global media. That's all media. That's television, radio, movies, billboards, the internet, and newspapers. 7 corporations. And they spend annually in advertising about $500 trillion. Now, that's all to move into our heads and control our ways of thought and the boundaries of what we know and what we think. It's a massive takeover of consciousness. Now, we all thought the internet was going to reverse that and provide more democracy. And it provides certain kinds of things that are useful, but I don't see it offsetting what's going on otherwise. The 8th one, the 7th one that I talk about, or the 6th one I talk about in the book, is the inherent propensity toward war. In other words, war is good business. It employs people at low wages. You get to build all these toys, these military toys. Even if you don't use them, you get to build them and profit from them. Then you get to use them, and if you use them, then you get to replace them. It's very, very good business activity, and and that's intrinsic to the model too, just as other kinds of destructive behaviors are. And then there's the question of happiness. Does it work? Does it bring anything beneficial to the society? And the answer to that is no.